What's up everyone, it's this guy, and today I'm going to walk you through building and then mounting a pegboard organizer. It's basically pegboard mounted to the wall, and you stick your pegs in it, put your tools or pots and pans or craft stuff or whatever you want. But I'm going to walk you through the process, and I'm going to kind of leave it a little open so that you can tinker with different sizes. The one that I'm doing today is kind of an odd size, 4 feet wide, 32 inches in height. But you can pretty much do this with any size pegboard that you want. And then when it comes to mounting it, going to kind of take a little bit of a different approach than just drilling it into the wall. And so let's jump into the materials that you're going to need, and then we'll quickly jump into some of the tools. So when it comes to building a pegboard organizer, the materials that you're going to use are going to depend on the actual pegboard that you pick up. Now, when I visited the hardware store, I actually saw options for 2 foot by 4 foot, saw an option for 4 foot by 4 foot, and then I saw 4 foot by 8 foot. And all of those are valid. I happen to have a really weird size here, 32 inches by 48, so I'm going to do my build based off of this particular size. Now the plan is this: when you do a pegboard organizer, you're basically mounting pegboard to the wall, right? Now you have to leave a gap between the pegboard and the wall itself, or when you go to insert the pegs, they're just going to hit the wall. So we have to add a strip frame behind it. You've also got a few options there. The most simple option is to buy some 1x2s and just kind of strip frame it behind and then just drill directly through this into the wall and support it that way. Pretty simple. I'm going to go a little bit different. I'm using 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square pieces of wood for my build. Now because my pegboard is 48 inches by 32 inches, I'm going to need enough wood to frame out the outer edges. Now 2 8-foot lengths of this wood will be enough. I'm going to have a little bit extra, which is good because like I said, I'm going to use some of this wood also to build the mounting mechanism that I'm going to use to mount it to the wall as well. Now I will advise you though, when you are buying a wood, whether it's a 1.5 by 1.5 or a 1x2 or whatever it is, before you purchase the wood, you want to take it and you want to sight down the wood like this, and you want to find the straightest pieces of wood possible. That way you're not getting anything that's warped, especially if you're going to go with the granddaddy build, which is a 4 foot by 8 foot. You absolutely want to make sure that the wood framing is as straight as possible. Now you are going to need wood screws for the build as well. I'm using 1.25 inch coarse thread wood. These are actually for sheetrock, but they work phenomenally for something like this. I've also got a 2.5 inch screw here. It's probably the shortest I would go when you're going to mount to the wall. Maybe a 3 inch would be a little bit better, but the goal when we get to this point is that you're going to mount a screw through a piece of wood, which is 1.5 inches thick for mine. And then we're going to go into the stud. So 2.5 inches, probably the minimum you want to go. 3 inches, probably playing it a lot safer. Other tools that are pretty standard, you're going to need a stud finder. I'm also going to be using a tape measure. And then also I would recommend using a drill bit. And this is going to be for a pre-drill. You could use a 9/64 or a 5/32, just something that's a little bit more narrow than the screws you're using. And that's so that you can basically drill a pilot hole in the screw, because when you're working with wood that's so thin, you may split it if you're just going directly in with the screw. So just to play it safe. I almost forgot that you're also going to need a square, just to make sure that the edges that we're making are straight. And last but not least, you're going to need a cordless drill. Now before we get too far into this, I want to show this off. This is a Carpenter's pencil sharpener. I actually picked this up at the hardware store. Before I had this thing, I only used a knife or like a razor to do this, so I'm pretty impressed with it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know that they made this thing. Check this out. Really cool. If you've watched me do other builds in the past, you know that I usually just like to take the piece of wood and lay it next to the item that I'm putting it on and then just mark it there. It's a lot easier than trying to measure it out. So pretty basic, placing the wood next to the pegboard and then marking it. From there, I'm basically using a square to make sure that the cut is straight. Now, I am using a miter saw, so it's probably going to be straight anyways, but it's good to just play it safe. And then from there, I'm just going to use my miter saw to make the cut. So I'm starting with the left and the right sides on purpose. I'm going to place the cut on top of the pegboard, and it's pretty much perfect. Now we're just going to repeat on the other side. So now we're going to take the other piece of wood and we're going to line them up side by side, and again we're going to make a cut. We want them to be the same, so let's make sure these are lined up. Then we can go ahead and we're going to mark out the cut. And then from there we'll go ahead and make the next cut. The piece of wood would then be laid on the opposite side of the pegboard, just like this. Make sure you line up the edges. Now we'll take the second piece, or the second 8-foot piece, and we're going to lay it on the bottom. The way that I'm going to align it is it's actually going to be on the inside of the other piece of wood. I'm not doing any fancy miter cuts here. There's actually no real benefit to a miter cut. We can just do straight cuts here. We'll keep it simple. So let's go ahead and mark the cut point. And like before, we're going to use a square to make sure that it's a straight line. Even though it's not necessary, here's a recycled shot of me cutting a piece of wood. Actually, I used this clip already. Now that it's cut, it's going to fit in between the two left and right uprights. I'm just going to tuck it in between like this. And again, we're making sure that it's aligned. Now to jump ahead a little bit, we're going to take the other piece of wood, the remaining piece, and we're going to use the piece we just cut, and we're going to mark our next cut. You probably guessed it, but the final cut will be placed at the top of the frame, in between the two pieces, and again, make sure it's lined up. So now we're going to add the drill bit to the drill, and this is so we can pre-drill our holes for the corners, and not worry about splitting the wood. Now we purposely want the screws to run parallel to the floor. It's the way that they're going to distribute the weight. So go ahead and make sure your edges are aligned, and then we're going to use the drill, and we're going to counter drill, or pre-drill, a small hole all the way through so that we can insert the screw. Now I'm going to use one of those 2.5-inch screws, and I'm going to insert it into the hole that we just drilled. Then we're going to fully seat it using our drill. We're going to repeat the process on the next corner, and then we're going to secure it with the screw, just like before. Go ahead and spin the pegboard around. I mean, I'm going to because my table's so big, so that I can get to the other side. And then I'm basically repeating the process on the other side. So the plan now is to go ahead and pull out the frame, or the pegboard, and we're going to flip it over. The pegboard is going to go on top of the frame now, and I got the black side facing out. From there, it's just a matter of making sure that all of the edges and corners are lined up with the frame now. So now it's time to use those 1.25-inch screws. We're going to be working our way around the frame and the pegboard, putting a screw into one of the peg openings here and there as we go all the way across. I'm starting on the corners. It could result in some bowing, or you can go every so many holes across, whatever works for you. You're basically working your way along the outside perimeter of the pegboard, adding a screw through the peg hole every now and then. Now, it is going to make those outer peg holes useless, but it doesn't matter. At this point, the build's almost done, but now I'm going to build the mechanism we're going to use to mount it to the wall. We're going to require 2 pieces of wood, about maybe 5 inches, maybe 6 inches in length. Now this step will require a miter saw, hopefully you have one, and we're going to go ahead and set it to 45 degrees. The plan is we're going to split those 2 pieces of wood down the middle at 45 degrees. They should look like this. You're basically cutting a wedge, kind of like this, and it's going to be placed on the inside corner, just like this. You're going to use a drill. We're going to make pilot holes. You're going to actually require 2 pilot holes for this step. Then you're going to secure the wedge in place with 2 of the 2.5-inch screws. And you probably guessed it, you're going to repeat this on the other side of the pegboard. Now the other 2 wedges that are left over are going to be used to actually mount the pegboard to the wall, and you're going to have to put pilot holes in them. 2 of them, one here and then one right below it. And the reason you need 2 is so that they don't rotate. So when it comes to mounting these things, again, it's going to be pretty interesting. This is the wall, and they're going to mount like this. So there's going to be like this exposed kind of angled piece that the other piece will fit into, and we're going to mount them onto the wall here. Now when it comes to mounting on the wall, I'm going to leave it up to you on how you want to go about doing this. If you're going with an 8-foot design, it's going to be really heavy. You're going to want to mount directly to the studs. And you should be able to do that because your studs are either going to be 24 inches apart or 16 inches apart. And if you do the math, you'll always find a stud at 8 foot. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. In the event that you need, let's say it doesn't hit a stud, you can always add a brace. Like let's say you take a 1x4 piece of wood and you strap it across the piece, across the wall on the top and the bottom, and then you can mount this to that. That's kind of a workaround you can do. But if you're going 8 foot, you want to definitely go to the stud. If you're going smaller than that and you're not going to put a tremendous amount of stuff on there, you can use sheetrock anchors that I've used in the past. But again, I'm going to leave that up to you on how you want to go about doing that. But now we're going to go ahead and we're going to mount. So the measuring tape I'm using is going to come in handy here. I'm basically measuring the space on the outside edges of the wedges. And that's going to help me mount my other wedges onto the wall. Now, I highly recommend that you use a level for this step or it's going to be crooked. Actually, I used a level and it still came out crooked, so absolutely want to make sure you're using a level. Also note that I am going very low on the wall. I don't know why, but I'd probably go higher with that. So the way that it works is the wedge will be mounted on the wall like this, and then you're going to place the screw into the pre-drilled hole. Apologies in advance for this really weird angle. I'm also not in focus, but you kind of get the gist of it. Now I probably cut it a little too tight, but the plan is this. Your pegboard frame will kind of go on top of these wedges like this. And the wedges that are on the inside of the frame that are going in the opposite direction will lock onto the wedges that are there. So that's how you mount it. Again, it's low and crooked, but you can do yours higher. Okay, now before you make fun of me, yes, it is mounted very low. It might be a little bit crooked, but in my defense, it's not a real wall. It's actually a set wall that I use for some of my in-studio work, so I'm putting it there. This is actually a precursor to a big project that I'm working on for a client where I'll be doing a peg hook organizer video where they're going to send me a tremendous amount of peg hooks and I'm going to do some work for them. It's for an Amazon listing, so I'm getting ready for that, but I figured since I'm working on a bigger pegboard, I'll show you guys how to make a regular human-sized pegboard. Okay, in order to redeem myself, this is the pegboard that I'm using for the Amazon project. It's an Amazon listing for peg hooks. That's a pegboard that I'm working on for the studio, but the one that I'm showing you in this video is more reasonable.